Welcome to SGSM. Um, today's episode, today's review is Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice. What to say about this movie? Well, I guess the best way to summarize all of it is that this movie was ambitious and tried to do a lot of things. Unfortunately, it definitely fell flat on a lot of it. So, what kinds of things did they fall flat on? Or what were they ambitious about? Well, they the subtitle Dawn of Justice is meant to insinuate that, as well as with the end of the movie. Oh, there will be spoilers in this. So if you haven't seen the movie yet and you care about spoilers, then you should probably not watch this. But if you don't care about spoilers or have already seen the movie, then yeah. Um, so the end of the movie, as well as the subtitle, insinuates that there will be the beginning of a DC cinematic universe involving the Justice League, whereas the Marvel cinematic universe has the Avengers. Um, that so the way that Marvel did it was that they gave movies to each of the main characters of the Avengers, including the Hulk, though they had a different actor play Bruce Banner. That's okay, but they gave entire movies to each of these characters to introduce them and gave teasers to say, hey, we're going to do crossover movies. Look for it. And they were very subtle about it, and they never. In this movie, they introduce the DC Cinematic Universe Batman. They introduce Wonder Woman. They introduce The Flash. They introduce who's the well, I mean, they introduced Lex Luthor as a probably recurring villain, and they hint at things to come. The problem is that they introduce so many characters. The story becomes clunky and fractured. They're constantly, every 2 to 3, maybe 5 minutes, cutting from one person to the other. Whether they're cutting from, they could cut from Batman to Lois Lane. They could cut, and then from Lois Lane to Superman, and then from Superman to Lex Luthor, and then from Lex Luthor they could cut back to Lois Lane, and then they could cut to a dream sequence that Batman has, which is another thing that was incredibly confusing in this movie, is that they would cut to dream sequences that were clearly, they were so out of place. There was one in particular where it seemed like Batman had a vision and had somebody appear to him from the future, which I know was supposed to be sort of a lead in to other characters in the DC cinematic universe. But it was just it was just constantly like, what's going on? I don't know what's going on. What is going on in this movie? I have no idea what's going on in this movie. And it takes so long for any of the pieces to fall together. And the character dialogue is frustrating. The characters just don't seem to mesh. The you know what characters had good charisma on screen? Jeremy Irons playing Alfred, and there was kind of a little bit of chemistry between um, Batman and Wonder Woman. Uh, oh, and you know who was Lex Luthor was kind of charismatic, but the person who played him, it was just it was maybe a little too insane for Lex Luthor. Not not exactly what I would imagine him as, or even how he was a little too insane. He was very smart in the movie, which, yes, Lex Luthor is supposed to be one of the smartest people in the DC cinematic universe, or in the DC comic series. He's the DC counterpart to Doctor Doom, who's supposed to be one of the smartest individuals in the Marvel universe. But man, nobody else had charisma. It was just the dialogue between the characters was clunky, and there was some weird parts. There were children as young as, I'd say, about 4 in the theater that I was in, and disregarding that my experience was kind of botched in the first place by the fact that the theater that we were in, the speakers on the left-hand side kept cutting out, which was a disappointment, especially during the action scenes. It'd be like you're engrossed in the action scene, and suddenly all the sound cuts out from your left side, and you're just, well, that's fun. Um, this movie was violent, and it didn't. This was a comic book movie that didn't feel like a comic book movie. It, but it didn't really feel like the kind of dark action movie that they really wanted it to be. I know that they're trying to go for a sort of darker, more adult um, theme to the DC movies, but this is Superman and Batman that we're talking about, and Wonder Woman. These are classic comic book heroes who are supposed to. It just didn't feel like the characters were who they were supposed to be. Um, Now, that doesn't mean that the individual performances were bad. Ben Affleck really tried hard. He tried so hard with this role. It just didn't quite get it. I mean, and again, Jeremy Irons' performance as Alfred was fantastic, and I don't think that he got enough screen time. But that's because this movie was 2 hours and 45 minutes, and it felt like a 4-hour movie. About halfway through, I realized, oh my god, actually, it wasn't even halfway through. Before even Batman, there's a point where uh, Batman is getting the kryptonite from Lex Luthor's shipment that he's going to use to weaponize, which Lex Luthor was going to do the exact same thing. It's like, okay, Lex Luthor wants to weaponize kryptonite to have it a turn against Superman. Batman wants to steal the kryptonite to kill Superman. Why didn't they just work together? Honestly, Lex Luthor even gives the offer. He's like, why don't we team up together sometimes when they're at a party together? He's like, you'd be amazed by the mischievous things that my R&D department is coming up with. And you know what? I would have rather seen that. I would have rather seen that for Lex Luthor, the insane genius scientist engineer, to team up with Batman, the genius billionaire these two definitely human, practically geniuses, crazy engineers and scientists putting their heads together to defeat Superman. But that's not what we got. Instead, you get this weird, convoluted plot where Lex Luthor is trying to convince everybody that Superman is actually a bad guy, and at the same time, he goes and learns a bunch of stuff from the crashed ship, and which, by the way, they felt that they had to show like 8 or 10 minutes of backstory at the beginning, like, oh, by the way, Bruce Wayne, his parents died, and we're gonna show it in very slow, very deliberate, very impactful shots, which they were good shots. That didn't stop the 6-year-old behind me from crying because watching people get killed in slow motion and close up camera shots, watching the life drain out of somebody's eyes, is kind of scarring imagery. But then they proceed to show about 5 or 6 minutes of Man of Steel from Bruce Wayne's perspective, which was uh, so Lex Luthor tries to get Man of Steel to. It's so hard to go through the plot of this movie because it's so scattered and so incoherent. Lex Luthor tries to get Superman people to turn on him, and he's kind of successful. In the process, because he's kind of insane, he kills a whole bunch of people. He blows up the Capitol building. It's it's a lot. It's a lot to deal with. And there's this whole like subplot about Lex Luthor importing the kryptonite from the world generator machine from the Indian Ocean, and then there's when that doesn't work, and some senator blocks who's on the head of the Superman committee that we've never heard of before. Um, he blows her and the whole committee up in a hearing, which he kills some of his own uh, employees and tries to blame it on Superman, and then uh, Batman steals the kryptonite from uh, Lex Luthor, and then he creates a bunch of weapons, which is exactly what Lex Luthor said that he was going to do. He was going to create a silver bullet to deter Batman. He was like, if you don't want, like, if we forge a silver bullet, then we don't always have to rely on the help of monsters, because as Batman and Lex Luthor both said, he's our friend until he's not. Now, that's not exactly what they said. They had more cinematic lines than that, but that's basically what they were saying. They said, he's an alien. Anytime that he wants to turn against us and kill all of us, he definitely could. Which they were right about. So Lex Luthor gets this convoluted plot where he acquires the body of General Zod, uses a scalpel made out of kryptonite to cut the fingerprints off of Zod and place them over his own fingers so that he could get into the Metropolis crash site, and brought the body of General Zod into the Genesis chamber, adding his own blood to turn Zod into a monstrous Kryptonian nightmare. And it was, I was like, what? The even just saying that as the, just mind. Oh, and there's a part where Lex Luthor kidnaps Martha Clark, and yeah, and then uses that to convince Superman to go fight Batman. And Superman's just trying to get Batman to listen. But then the two of them end up having this big fight, and right as Batman is about to kill Superman is when Lois Lane steps in, saves Superman, and is like, oh, and then a bunch of stuff happens. She throws the spear into the Batman made to kill Superman into a well. No, it was a dilapidated bus station or some. No, not bus station, train station, subway line, and like like a dumb bitch, uh, throws it to the bottom of a pool of water. She ends up getting trapped under. Superman saves her, of course, because Superman is always tuned in to Lois Lane radio. Even in the middle of their fight, and then Wonder Woman kind of just appears, even though she's like kind of been in the movie, kind of as a mysterious figure until you Batman finally figures out, oh, hey, look, she's not really a human. Because Lex Luthor early in the movie is talking about, oh, the metahuman theory, which is that there's a whole bunch of these godlike people walking among us, and anytime they want to reveal their presence, they can, but they like to keep it hidden. So why not bring these people out of hiding so we can figure out ways to deal with them if they ever turn against us? And now let me say, the action scenes, particularly the last one with Wonder Woman, is good. And you know what? I would have loved to see more action with Wonder Woman. Some sort like actual backstory and explanation and talk about her powers and what powers she has exactly. Because she comes out in this Amazonian outfit with her sword and shield and her lasso, her magic fucking lasso, and the people in the audience are like, I gotta know. I mean, I know she's Wonder Woman, probably, but I got no clue what the fuck any of this does. Why does it work on this Kryptonian? She cuts the Kryptonian's arm off. It's like, should she be able to do that? What's the sword made of? It shoots like this huge beam of plasma. It's like a power up version of Superman's laser eyes. And is it and it hits her shield, and it looks like her shield's dissolving and is like red hot, and then it kind of fades back in, and you're like, the shields can block stuff. What? How much can it block? Oh, and she blocks the plasma thing with her um, um, armlets. I want to say, and you're like, those are a thing too. Cool. She's super strong and super fast, and you feel like Batman is way out of his depth in that fight. And you just the entire time you're like, I was thinking of so many ways where you could structure this story better if you could split it up into more than one movie. You had Man of Steel, and I know that there have been way too many Batman movies already, and I think that there were some hints in the Batcave that kind of imply that this Batman is the Dark Knight Batman. But there's not really anything to say for sure. I mean, there's some stuff about Joker and Two Face that are kind of like tossed in, these little hints being like, those were things, I think. Because they talk about how all good men go bad, and then there was a suit of Batman armor that had, haha, the joke's on you, spray painted on it. But it was, and this movie was so incoherent. It was so hard to follow. The entire time, I'm just thinking, there's so much better ways. You take, if you want to make all of the Dark Knight movies canon and then just replace the actor with Ben Affleck, sure, sure, fantastic. If you want to use have it in the same universe as Man of Steel, fantastic. Whatever, it's fine, it's fine. Um, and then Wonder Woman should have gotten her own movie. Just plain and simple, she should have gotten her own movie. And then roll the three together. And not had to go back and talk about all of the backstory for Batman and for Superman and just oh. This movie was not very good. Even a lot of the action scenes, I'm like, there was like really shaky cams at some of the scenes. Some of the shots were just ah, they were unclear, and I was wondering, did they not have like a track to move the camera along for this? Uh, there some parts where the CGI effects were questionable, especially pertaining to the Kryptonian monster that was formerly General Zod, and just so much stuff that how do you even? And this movie was dark. I'm not just talking about the scenes and the flashbacks where they talk. Oh, the dream sequence, the prophecy sequence that Batman has came out of fucking nowhere. Batman is sitting there waiting for files to decrypt, and suddenly he's in the Middle East or in Africa trying to get his hands on kryptonite, and a whole bunch of like loyal Superman followers like capture him, and then Superman comes down and everyone's like bowing down on their knees when he comes through, and then Superman like totally murders Batman, and you're like, what the fuck is happening? You're like, where the fuck did this come? And there's like all these weird bug things that are flying out of the sky with like multiple sets of wings that are like 8 feet tall, and you're like, where the fuck did these things come from? I'm not even fucking kidding. I'm not even. There's 8 foot tall bug things with wings, and you're like, why? Where did this come from? I mean, clearly this is supposed to be something down the line, but it came out of nowhere as a dream sequence, and you're just like, they spent like 4 or 5 minutes on it, and the entire time I'm wondering, when is the movie gonna happen? And then there was the wrap up scene because, spoiler alert, Superman dies. Except that he doesn't. Because, of course, Superman doesn't die. You can kill other Kryptonians, Zod, whatever. But Superman can't die. He, when the, what I wanted to, oh man, I so wanted somebody to call it the Spear of Destiny. Batman makes a couple of canisters of like aerosol kryptonite and a spear. And the spear is pretty fucking bitchin'. But with all of the god imagery that they use and that they relate to Superman, all of the things about angels and demons, I wanted somebody to refer to it as the Spear of Destiny. Lex Luthor would have been great for just somebody is the spear of destiny is the spear that pierced Jesus on the cross. It's supposed to be some magical artifact. Comparing it to that would have been absolutely perfect, along with all of their other allegorical shit. But they didn't do that, and I was disappointed. But the way that Superman almost dies, I guess, or temporarily dies, is that he grabs the spear, which is made of a huge shard of kryptonite attached to, I guess, some kryptonite steel alloy or something, and fly towards the Kryptonian monster, General Zod, and shove it through him. And since he's in such close proximity with kryptonite, he becomes vulnerable. General Zod's like regrown claw pierces through Superman, and he dies. They have a big funeral, 21 gun salute. Superman indirectly asks Lois Lane to marry him by sending a ring in the mail. And there was no post-credit scene, though. Thank God. Ugh. This movie, though, it was just... And I haven't even covered all of it. I mean, a lot of movies, it's like even long movies, you can cover in a brief period of time and get most of the movie pretty well packed up. One of my favorite recent movies was Hateful Eight. And that was a 3-hour, I believe, an 8-minute running time. A full 23 minutes longer. Yeah, a full 23 minutes longer than Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice. And this movie felt way longer than Hateful Eight. It wasn't... A good movie is a movie where it doesn't really matter how long the movie is. You either feel satisfied at the end, or any dissatisfaction that you receive at the end is because the movie isn't longer. You want more of it. At maybe an hour in, I don't know exactly how far, but definitely before halfway through, I said to myself, there's over an hour left in this. This movie has... When Batman stole the kryptonite from Lex Luthor, there is over an hour, maybe even an hour and a half left in this movie. Oh my God. Can I please just go home? I considered walking out of the theater at that point because it wasn't very good. Now, there wasn't really a lot of product placement or anything like that, which is... I think there was like a couple deliberate shots. One was of Bruce Wayne's car before he goes to Lex Luthor's party, which I think was supposed to be a Chrysler. Honestly, I don't know. But that's because I don't know much about cars. But oh man, this movie felt so long. It felt like a 4-hour movie or longer. I remember in the last couple of minutes I was sitting there like, I gotta pee. I was like, I know that everything's wrapping up very, very slowly. See, one of the good things about the Marvel movies, the way that they do it, is they finish the movie, then they start the credits, and they can either have a mid-credit scene or a post-credit scene, or both. They could have both. But what that does is that you can keep the movie down to a shorter running time. At the end of the movie, people go to the bathroom, and since they know that it's a Marvel movie, they go to the bathroom, they come back, and they see the end scene, the basic teaser for the next big Marvel movie or the next big Marvel crossover movie. In this, where the movie should have ended was during the two funerals that Superman got. They got one for Clark Kent at the farmhouse in Kansas, and they had a military one, I guess, in Washington D.C. or in Metropolis. I don't know. I don't really care. And they had this big memorial scene, the scene memorial and stuff, and that should have been the end of the movie. They should have gone to credits at that point, right after they showed the quote at the memorial. And then, so they cut the credits, and then you go to the bathroom, and then after about 5 minutes, using the bathroom, waiting in lines to go to the bathroom, you come back, and you see the post-credit scene, which is Batman talking to Wonder Woman at Superman's grave, with Lois Lane at the grave, and Wonder Woman is talking with Batman about the other metahumans coming out of hiding and basically forming a league, and oh, they'll have to fight. I just have a feeling Lois. Then the scene in the prison with Lex Luthor, where Batman's like, anywhere that you go, I will find you. He basically Batman breaks into a prison, beats up Lex Luthor a little bit, threatens him mostly, and Lex Luthor's like, there's a thing that I call the I have rung the bell, the thing is coming. The thing is coming. This totally ambiguous thing from space. It's coming. And then Lois Lane tossing the first handful of dirt on Superman's grave, and then it coming up, like it very slightly rises above the grave because Superman's actually alive. And then they would have cut to the second set of credits, or that would have been the cutoff scene for the very end of the movie, and boom, done. Would have been great, or better at least. That would have been the hope. Fragmenting the movie the way that they did, though, was so terrible, so terrible. And giving us a little bit more, breaking it into separate movies so that we could have had more time with some of the side characters, like the head. Oh God, because there's another subplot that I haven't even mentioned where Lex Luthor was selling weapons to terrorist groups in Africa, like prototype super experimental weapons that the Pentagon can't even identify. But you just don't. This movie is not very good. And you shouldn't take anyone probably under the age of 10 to go see it, because they probably won't like it. Because this isn't a movie that appeals to children. This wasn't a movie that really appealed to me. This isn't a movie that appeals to old people. This movie it probably doesn't even really appeal to big comic book nerds, because it doesn't feel like a comic book movie. There's none of the humor or the banter or the rapport, the wittiness or anything that you really expect out of any of these characters. Like, Wonder Woman doesn't even have a personality. She's just Wonder Woman. She's strong and she's a woman. I mean, what else do you need to know about this character other than that she's really old? Because they mention that she dropped out of society for about 100 years. Oh, goodness. I give this movie um uh I'm trying to think of something clever, but since I can't think of anything clever at the moment, I'm going to give this movie a 2 out of 5 because it just it just really wasn't appealing. I mean, and I didn't read any reviews before going in to see this movie. Just I had hoped that this would be a good movie. I had went into this hoping that this movie would have been a good experience and that the negative the headlines that I saw and the 26% score on Rotten Tomatoes would have just been people overreacting, and it really wasn't. I can't say that I like this movie or that I'd go see it again. Though some lady came out and she was like, "This was the fourth time that I've seen this movie," and I'm like, "Really? You came? You spent over 10 hours of your life watching this movie 4 times? This mess 4 times?" The next episode of SGSM, though, will be my first gaming episode where I'll review something that you don't know. Anyways, this has been SGSM. Until next time.